Hello and welcome to Technoracted Tutorials. Today I'm going to do a simple parallax example. As with any coding project, I like to set up version control. I'm going to use Git and GitHub with this project. First, we create a new repository. I'm going to name this one Simple Parallax Example. I give my project a simple description, set it to public, add a git ignore for no just in case I want to use it in the future, and I add a license of MIT so it's freely available for anyone to use and download. Now I just click on the clone button and copy the link that's provided. I use SSH. I recommend everybody else to use it. It makes things a lot easier, and there's instructions on their website on how to set that all up. I open up my terminal and cd into the directory that I want to use, and now I'm just ready to clone it by typing in git clone and then that link that you were provided. After moving into the project that you just cloned, you can open it up in your favorite text editor and get ready to start editing. I use Visual Studio Code for this example. Instead of having everything in one HTML file like your scripts and your styles, I like to split things up. So here I create a CSS folder for my style sheets and a JS folder for my scripts. In the JS folder, I create a new file to hold the scripts, and in the CSS folder, I create a file to hold the styles. Now finally, I create an HTML file in the root directory. Now that we got all our folders and files set up, we need to start filling this HTML. I'm going to grab some source from example.com instead of typing it in manually. The source that came from example.com is full of stuff that I don't really want to use, so I'm going to quickly clean up some of that stuff. In the JavaScript file, I'm just going to have a quick console log so I know everything is working. And I pretty much do the same thing for the style sheet. I just put in some generic styles for this example. For those who are new with coding, I just want to show a quick example how easy it is to pull up what you're looking for. First, I want to link an external CSS sheet to my HTML. I find W3 Schools a great resource, so this is great. After quickly reading the tutorial, I find what I need and copy it and get it ready to paste into my HTML. I changed the href to match the same style sheet that I've created earlier. Now to open up the HTML file in your favorite browser. Once you find it, you can normally right click it and then there should be an option to open with. Here it's right at the top. Looks great. Now I want to link an external JavaScript file. So I do the same thing. I just do a quick search for link external JavaScript file, and I come up with W3 Schools again, which is great, and find the script that I'm looking for and paste it into my code. I make sure to make changes to the source location to match the JavaScript file from before. I right-clicked on my browser's window and select Inspect. It allows me to reach my console tab and see the message that I wrote in my JavaScript file from before. Okay, now for the fun part. We're going to create 3 different divs. The first one is going to be a blank div for some scroll space. The second one is going to be the scene. And then the third one is going to be another blank space. I am sure to give each div their own class name. Shortly, I'm going to give Parallax Scene an ID instead of class. Copy the class names over to the style sheet so we can change the styles. After formatting the style sheet a little bit, I go back to the index or HTML file and change the class to ID. This is very important for me to reference later. Now I go back to the style sheet and modify scroll space to have a width of 100% and the height of 100, view height. I do the same thing with Parallax Scene, adding the width and height as well. I want to make this responsive, so that's why I'm using percentages. Adding background color to your divs makes it easier to work with them and see them on your browser. I now create a layer style. This one's going to have the same dimensions as the scene, but now I'm going to add a position absolute and an overflow hidden, so objects do not push the div to different dimensions. There is going to be approximately 4 different objects in this scene, so I make a layer for each object, numbering them 1 to 4 for the time being. Go back to the HTML file, and inside the Parallax scene div, add in the layer divs that you created in your style sheet. Make sure that you change the ID of each one to the appropriate name. I quickly add a 5th layer to the style sheet, and then I add a Z index to each layer so that each object could be displayed in proper order. Now to go back to the HTML file and make a new div for a background in layer 1. Be sure to add a style for your newly created background div. I set the background color to some aqua blue color to represent a sky. I'm not too happy with the results, so I once again do a quick Google search on how to do a gradient. W3 Schools comes to the rescue again. I quickly find the style that I need and I add it to the background. It looks a lot better now. Well, maybe not that much better. I'm going to have to play around with the colors a little bit to get this to look a little bit better. I just adjust both of the colors and try to find some kind of sky color, and let's try out the results. Well, half the fun is making some little minor adjustments here and there until you find something that you like. I finally picked something. The sky looks good enough for now. I think it's time to work on the sun. So go back into your HTML file and create another div in layer 2 and create a sun div. Then be sure to make a style for the sun. I'm going to give it rounded corners so it appears like a circle. You just set it at 50% and there you go. Now go back to your HTML file and let's create a hill. So we create another div, name it Parahill, and be sure to make a style for that as well. I pretty much copy the sun style, but start playing around with the border radius a little bit more. This is kind of like a trial and error, unless you're an expert and know exactly the position each coordinate is. I just keep on playing around with the numbers until I get the shape that I kind of want, and I make something that kind of looks like a hill. With a quick online search, you can learn how to make a lot more different shapes using CSS styles and get something closer to what you want. And you can also add a background to these divs to give it more texture. Adding margin to the style will change its location. In the HTML file, in layer 4, I create another div, Paragrass, to represent grass, also giving it a style. I set the width at 100% because I want it to cover the full width of the screen, and then I give it 50 view height because I still want it responsive. I wonder what's going on, and then I quickly realize that I forgot to save it, so it's not making any changes after the refresh. I figure that both the hill and the grass are sitting a little bit too high. It's not exactly what I want. So I adjust the margin top, the margin left, until I find a position that I like each one of them. There we go, that looks much better now. Well, I think I was maybe a little bit too ambitious. We don't quite need that 5th layer. I think this is pretty good for the scene. After clearing up that 5th layer, it's finally time to get to the nitty-gritty JavaScript part. We create an event listener for window on scroll. So when you scroll, it will trigger the function that you assign it. I just console log the window page Y offset. also known as your scroll position. This way I can see the numbers in the console log in the browser. We're going to need a couple variables. So I create one called scroll lock and one called div lock. The scroll lock is going to hold the window page Y offset, and the div location is going to hold the offset of the selected div. Creating more console logs to output their inputs, you'll be able to see more clearly on what each variable is doing. We create another variable, div height. This one's going to hold the scroll height of the selected div. Again, console logging the new div height variable to make sure everything is running smoothly. I go back to the HTML file and put in another div for blank space. I want to make sure that my math is all adding up correctly. Now I'm able to look at the console log once again and see the results that I was expecting. It is always a good idea to leave a couple comments in your code. This way, if you come back later, you'll know what you were trying to achieve. I created another variable, div point, dividing div location by div height. This is just to create a reference point for the ratios. Another variable, scroll point, dividing scroll location by div height. I got my second ratio. Another quick console log, and I'm able to see the differences in the ratios that I created. Now with the variable %, I want to create a difference between the scroll point and the div point. Console log shows that it's not showing exactly what I want, so I just changed the order to have scroll point minus the div point. Good. Now there's a nice reference for the scroll position over the div. Now I create a function to actually move the sun. A variable sun x, sun y, sun x change, and sun y change. Sun x and y is going to hold the percentage it's going to move while scrolling across the scene. I quickly change sun change to sun unit, as this is going to be the unit I'm going to need to use in a string form. Now it's just a matter of assigning the sun ID the style margin left to the sun x unit and the margin top to the sun y unit. After calling the move sun function in the onScroll function, we're able to see the action in effect. By tweaking the sun x and sun y variables, you're able to move the sun into the angles and positions that you desire. Now I want to move the background while I'm scrolling, so I quickly copy over the move sun and make another function and make some tweaks so it starts modifying the background instead. I changed the x-axis to 0 because I don't want it to move horizontally. Make sure to call your move background function in your onScroll function. Looks like it's working, but a little bit too small, so here we change the style to increase the height of the background so it doesn't clip while we're scrolling across the screen. I'm not too happy with the gradient, so I add in a few more properties and start adjusting the colors. It's a little bit closer to what I'm expecting, and I also change it from top to bottom. I don't know about you, but tweaking things like the color and the positions is very fun for me, and I recommend you to play around with these settings and find something that you like yourself. Now let's go back to the JavaScript file, and I make a modification to the y-axis. I do a -200 because I wanted to actually scroll backwards. Then I add in a +-200 so it gets rid of that black scroll bar. Back in the style sheet, we changed the background once again. The gradient's not quite what I want. It's not showing all the colors, so it's a little bit too tall. So I do some tweakings on that, and also I change it from bottom to top so it is in the proper orientation. I looked online at a couple pictures of sunsets, and I found that as the sun was setting, the sky kind of turned to a reddish purplish color. So I just start modifying all the colors to kind of represent the sky that you would imagine a sun setting. I find that looking at other examples like Google Images, you can find other art pieces and photos like a sunset, and you can use that for inspiration to build your art projects. There, that's looking pretty good. Let's go back to the JavaScript file, and here I just quickly add in a few more comments so if I come back to this in the future I know what I was doing. I want to move the hill now, so I copy the move sun function and create another function called move hill, and this time is going to be to move the hill. I only want the hill to move in the x-axis, so I set the y to 0 and modify the x to the appropriate value. Be sure to call your move hill function inside your onScroll function. And there we go. It seems to be working, but as you see it's kind of in the wrong position. So we go to the y value and I add in a plus 70 to change the vertical position. Again, don't be afraid to make any tweaks to the settings. I start changing around the x-axis and the amount of percentage it moves while we're scrolling until I find an appropriate setting. I go back to the style sheet and I start making some modifications to the gradient once again and start playing around with the settings. I decide on colors that I think is a little bit more appropriate, and I think I've come to the results that I was looking for. Here on Visual Studio Code, I find it very easy to commit your source. All you need to do is click on the commit button, type in the message that you want to commit, click the check mark, and then you're done. I also love the fact that Visual Studio Code has a built-in terminal. I just click on View, Terminal, and then now I can type in git push, and there we go, it's pushed to GitHub. And that is how easy it is to make things move as you scroll. I recommend in the future to create a function that can take in multiple properties instead of repeating the same function over and over again. Thank you for watching this tutorial, and I recommend you to subscribe as it gives me more motivation to create more content. Tech Arachnid out.